Now we'll go to the report, decision-making part of the report. Look, at this point, I just do want to acknowledge our new Chief of Strategy, Megan Tyler. This is now, we've seen Megan in the chair standing in for Jim Quinn, the former Chief of Strategy, but she is now in the chair as the Chief of Strategy and an additional member, female member at the executive leadership team. So it's a big move for not just Megan, but I think it's a big move for council as well, acknowledging the long contribution and the long training period, maybe, Megan, but just really do want to acknowledge you being with us at this meeting, guiding us through this meeting as Chief of Strategy, and congratulate you on that role again.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I think the opportunity is now lost, but I know that both of the local board members were hoping that you would consider a matter of precedence in the agenda item. They were hoping to be present for that.
Okay, I've been asked that for others. So we've got staff members. Look, I'll look at that when we get to the private plan changes, but we've got a presentation at the beginning of when we get to the private plan changes, and those staff aren't here yet. So at this stage, I need to proceed with at least item 8 and item 9. Thank you, though. Going to item 8, welcome Penny Perrott.
Thank you. This item is really seeking endorsement from the Planning Committee for a joint work program that has been put together between Auckland Council Group and central government to work together on an issue that both central government and Auckland Council have said is really important, and that's about increasing the housing supply in Auckland and in particular ensuring that new housing is secure, healthy and affordable, and that there are choices for people in that housing supply. There's a lot of work currently happening in that space at the moment, and there's quite a lot of pressure on both central government and Auckland Council staff to work on a range of different projects. The purpose of this joint work program is to say, how can we prioritise our efforts so that we can get some actions underway and achieve some outcomes and work in a collaborative way that we add value by working together rather than individually down in Wellington or up in Auckland. So I'm not going to talk too much more, but this work program is very much about achieving things, but also demonstrating a different approach to how we might work in a more collaborative and integrated style between central and local government. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And just at the outset, the Mayor will move, the Deputy Mayor will second, and with the addition of the C, because that is important, and I think just to be very, very clear, this is not a process that is outside of the council. This is a process of the council and government joining up, but it will be reported regularly to the Planning Committee as identified in the C. Questions, please. Councillor Casey.
Penny, we just heard from the community housing sector this morning that Auckland isn't building housing that people can afford to buy. How does this strategy do that? Show me the words and the actions that will build cheaper housing.
Through the Chair, the first thing is this isn't a strategy, this is a work program of different projects that the council and central government will work on together. And if you look at the A3 sheet that's in here, there is an area around affordable housing. So that picks up on the work that community and social policy is undertaking, and in the report, the item on the agenda that follows is more specific about that report. But it also acknowledges that central government in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development is also doing work around affordable housing, and we want to work together to make sure that we don't duplicate the effort in that space. And we also can add value by, coming together to do research, etc. So it is very much part of this joint work program. How can we look at the regulatory and non-regulatory tools to enable that affordable housing to be delivered.
Just a supplementary.
That's the case.
The word innovation doesn't appear in this, what did you call it, work programme anywhere. And that's a key word for me, that we've never actually been innovative in Auckland about trying things that elsewhere in the world have achieved the aim of housing people on low incomes. Is that part of this? Sorry, it's a very small line in here and it doesn't really give me much to go on. The Mayor's saying yes. Will I get him to answer the question?
The whole intention of this is to ensure that as we do work together, we do look at innovative new ideas, not just around affordable housing, but to do with some of the other program projects that we're looking at. So I think you might find it in the terms of reference, but I'd have to spend some time finding it. But certainly the whole point is to work together to be innovative. So it is part of the behaviour that we will be expecting from people working on this work programme.
Mr. Chairman, shall I?
Mayor Goff, please.
Just briefly in response to Councillor Casey, innovation's got to be critical to it in a number of different ways. The first way is in relation to how we build houses, not the cottage industry as we have for centuries, but how we use prefabrication, and that will be a contributor to affordable housing. The second way is to look at the regulations in the Building Act and the Building Code, which you see under Section 7, whereby we have rules in place that might have been sensible once upon a time, but if they stand in the way of being able to build more quickly and more cheaply without delivering on certainties around quality and weather tightness, etc., then we have to change that Building Act and those building codes. And we're pushing really hard for central government to bring that work program forward. We think that's absolutely critical to allowing innovation.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. Deputy Mayor Cashman, please.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
It is moved and second. Maybe if we go through the questions first and then I'll come back for your speaking turn. Is that okay? Thank you. Question from Member Henry.
Kia ora. Just in terms of, first of all, the Māori impact statement, which I think is a bit wishy-washy. And what worries me is that dealing with, I mean, one of the questions is where's the Kāinga strategic action plan in all of this? Because I think looking at everything, it's actually the only strategic plan out there that somebody's done some work on that actually forwarded an action plan, and it just keeps, from my point of view, keeps getting sort of passed over, and we should be taking the opportunity to say, oh, somebody's done some work. Here's a strategic plan on housing. Maybe we should run with it, or maybe we should endorse it. Maybe we should do something with it. But to have it sort of attached as a, oh well, we that's our Māori input is not for me to be. It's not good enough. In fact, IMSB spent lots of dollars on working with people and putting together the Kāinga strategic plan.
So obviously I can't talk for central government, but their strategic plan is the urban growth agenda, which has a lot of detail in it, and what we haven't tried to do is capture how they will be working with mana whenua and Matawaka in that space. We made reference to the Kāinga strategic action plan just because it was an example of how the affordable housing paper has worked and looked at that as part of the approach. But that's not to say that each one of these projects wouldn't use that as a starting point to work out what is important to Māori and how that would be embedded in the action plans. I suppose what we were indicating here that every one of these projects will have a touch point that we have to involve mana whenua in, but to try and spell that all out here when we're just at this stage getting sign off of a joint work program, we didn't do that.
I'm not sure whether this next question is for you or somebody else, but I'll give it a go anyway. The political governance group, which meets quarterly, and I'm not talking about the government can pick who they want to be part of that. But there's no Māori on the Auckland Council, and although all 4 people I would have on my team tomorrow, I'm just wondering where's the Māori input into that part of it. So I'm not sure whether that's a question for who actually.
I'll have a crack at that if you
Big
like,
Office
Mr.
going to
Chairman.
have a crack at that.
Yeah, I think that if this paper is approved, the 4 of us representing the council would want to have regular sessions and maybe sometimes specifically housing sessions with the IMSB so that we have that linkage. It's a fair point, and we need that input. And it's good on the central government side. We've got the minister, the Minister for Māori Development on it, because she'll be very focused on that.
Good point, Member Henare, thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is that a little bit better? Just one question. If we follow through on all these recommendations and work hard on these partnerships, when will housing become affordable in Auckland?
You'll love asking that question, don't you? we all want to know that answer. But Penny, I mean, as best you can, it's
Look, I think everybody knows that the housing challenge in Auckland, and not just Auckland, any growing city across the world, is complicated and not an easy fix. What this work program is doing is saying the power of central government and local government coming together to work on a number of actions to progress how we can perhaps reduce the complexity is something that it's really important that Auckland does with central government. This is not a point, this is not once we've completed all these actions that suddenly we will have affordable housing, because there are other actions that might need to also come after this, and that's why we'll be coming back with quarterly reports to this committee. But it is saying the power of working together is going to get us working towards that outcome more quickly than individually central government or Auckland Council doing it by its own. So I can't say when that will happen, but it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Councillor Bartley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I just wanted to ask, please, Penny, about the objectives and program of work, in particular where it says the costs of growth are understood and existing infrastructure and zoning is optimised. Does that mean no new infrastructure? We're just going to optimise our current infrastructure?
That piece of work refers to the fact that, as the committee will be aware, we have zoned through the unitary plan areas where there is no density control, so the terrace housing and apartment building zones, the mixed housing urban zones. If we put in infrastructure that is designed to service the amount of growth that those zones might enable, and then we find that the intensification, the increase of housing doesn't occur in those areas, that actually means we're not realising the amount of money that we've put into providing that infrastructure. So we need to look at ways that will encourage those places to grow and intensify, so we use our existing infrastructure to its capacity. That does not preclude the council and is not precluding the council. I mean, you know what you've already put in your long-term plan for new infrastructure in Greenfields area where we have indicated we will grow.
I have one more question. Actually, I have quite a few, but I'm just going to ask one more, if that's okay, please, Mr. Chair. I know this group is high-level strategic, and it's not getting involved in the governance of the work streams. But how is there going to be that connection? Because how is this group going to be in touch with the issues that are going on with the work streams if the governance of the work streams are actually a different entity? So what is the connection back? You know, local boards are hopefully going to be involved in the funding and investment plans for the developments in Oranga, Onehunga, Mount Roskill, Mangere, but my experience from the local board has actually been the IFFAs have nothing to do with the local boards. They've been done by officers. So yeah, it's all disconnected. So I'm wanting to see how is there going to be this connection, because this group will provide vital political oversight of all these developments that are happening. Thank you.
So what we're looking for is not. Do I need to move further away from it? The idea is not to, you're right, we have projects that already have their governance set up, and it's not to try and unpick those, but what we're trying to do is at the next level up, pull together the work programs of those governance groups and have a reporting process so that we do keep both at a political level, people informed, but also at a CE level, there will be a CE oversight as well. The point you've raised about how do we ensure that local boards are kept informed is something that I'll take away and work with local board services to think about how we might do better.
Thank you. Just a question from me, just in terms of the government's urban growth agenda and its determination to look at underpinning the improvement of housing by the provision of affordable urban land. And this is a big question that we're going to be looking at. And then they go on to say that they want to achieve that by avoiding qualified, unnecessary urban sprawl. So am I right in assuming that this is where we might be addressing the government's coalition agreement on review of the rural-urban boundary as well? Would we be progressing those discussions at least at the outset through this agreement?
So when this joint work program was first discussed, I think it was the desire to focus on things that at this stage we all agree on and can work in a collaborative and positive way, and that is around quality intensification, encouraging more affordable housing. There is no work program at the moment on this here that talks about the whether the rural urban boundary should be retained or removed. That doesn't mean that there is or could be work happening in central government on it, but it's I think the focus that we've put on this is more about quality intensification, and that might come out as something that the political steering group believes should be on the work program, but it is not specifically identified here.
If it did come out in the early stages, it's a big issue, and I would expect every member here would take an interest in that. So we would maybe identify it as a key issue that needs to be immediately brought back to the full planning committee or the governing body for that matter.
Oh, certainly. I mean, whether or not we have a rural urban boundary is a significant strategic conversation and decision by this council. It's something that's was first adopted in the Auckland Plan has continued to be adopted in refreshes of the Auckland Plan. It also is fundamental to the future urban land supply strategy. It's fundamental to our infrastructure and capital works program, and it's also fundamental in the unitary plan. So while there might be some joint central government and local government conversations about that, we would be, as the staff, coming to this committee for guidance on what that work program would be even before we started it, because it's such a key decision that is embedded in many of our strategic documents.
Thank you, Penny. Now, we've completed the questions, and speaking to it, Deputy Mayor, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Penny, for your explanations. This work program is at a high level, and it is specifically that to keep the wheels spinning and, more importantly, to gain traction. Because traction is the part that we've lost a little bit over the past couple of decades. The Mayor is dead right. There's a few things that absolutely have to be done. When you talk about the Building Act, the building code, brands, the risk profiles, these are key issues to turn around how we build. Consenting factories that produce consented houses. This sort of technology is available out there and needs to be uplifted. For this council holds a lot of IP in this area to work with the government can be of actually joint use. A lot less of the paralysis by analysis. When you look at the objectives in the work program, you know, it encompasses a whole bunch of really good things. And please let me quote briefly: increased and accelerated provision of quality, affordable housing, increased range of housing types and choices and locations and tenure and price points, achieving quality intensification, growth and development that supports climate resilience, funding and financing tools to enable infrastructure delivery, coordination of the Crown and Council infrastructure investment, integrated and well-located employment growth and opportunities. The costs of growth are understood and the existing infrastructure and zoning is optimised. Now, those are all absolutely critical points in the delivery of quality, more affordable housing at an increased rate. We're already having some good wins with the unitary plan, where we're getting 90% of the housing inside the RUB and a large percentage close to transport nodes. We're making progress, but there is still a housing shortage of between 30 and 40,000. We need to do more. We need to do more quickly. We have record number of consents, record numbers of codes of compliance. How much capacity is left in the industry? We need some short-term wins, and to do that, we have to work with the Crown. That's where this body has the potential to help accelerate the program, and that is of absolute essence. To answer Councillor Sayers' question, which is that, you know, when is Auckland Council and the government going to be able to deliver affordable housing? I can't answer that today, but it's a question we hope to be able to answer in the work program going forward.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And now the Mayor, Thorgoth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I remember before I came onto this council watching the train wreck that was the council's efforts in the last term to come down with a transport strategy, and it worked and it laboured hard to do that. It came up with a suggestion to find that the central government said, no, we don't like that, go back and start again. And that led to the Auckland Transport Alignment Project, which has been incredibly effective. Now, we're not always going to agree with central government. We'll have some significant fights over policy and over priorities and over direction. But what I know is we cannot achieve our objectives unless we work collaboratively and effectively with central government. We've got to find the common ground in order to make progress. So this is, if you like it, a housing equivalent to the Auckland Transport Alignment Project. It gives us, from this council, some quality time to spend with 4 key ministers. Ministerial time's pretty hard to get, and we're going to get it 4 times a year to enable us to press for the things that are really important and to work through some of the issues where there's disagreement. Now, you know, we've had some interesting discussions already today, affordability of housing. And the suggestion, you know, I love the Community Housing Providers Group. They're fantastic people. But in the whole history of housing in this city, we have not ever provided the capital to build affordable houses. Not ever. And that's not on the deliverable list, given all of the other pressures we have for infrastructure services. But by God, we need to be able to sit down with the government and say, we need this investment. We need it around homelessness to provide more housing opportunities there. We need it around more social housing. We need it around plans to try to make housing more affordable. And I do want to touch on Councillor Sayers' comment, when will it become more affordable? Hey, the really good news is that we're falling down the ladder. We're falling down the ladder of being the 4th least affordable city in the world, and now I think we're probably 11th or 12th. Still not a proud record. We are achieving stability in housing prices, whereas previously they were going up by 15% a year. That's another good step towards your objective, Councillor. But we also need, you know, there's a fundamental law of economics, it's called supply and demand. If demand exceeds supply, costs go up. And, you know, I'm really proud, I don't know whether every councillor has picked it up yet, but in the year to January 2019, we hit an all-time record in new building consents, 13,262, the highest ever. We completed more CCCs than ever before, and we got more building consents within the compact urban area. Hey, that's a celebration for all of us. So what I think this body will do, it's not a quick fix, it's not a magic bullet, silver bullet, but it is a way of getting us to be able to sit down with ministers. And I want to use the Deputy Mayor's example. I have been a bit frustrated. We set out in the building task force, which we got government and the private sector involved in. We did need to renew the Building Act and the building codes. You know, they're decades old and they're not fit for purpose. And the bureaucrats, Penny will know what I'm talking about here, but she couldn't possibly say it herself. The bureaucrats in MB are not pushing that as a priority. I keep asking. We've got a forum here, for example, where 4 of us can eyeball the ministers and say, hey, we want this lifted up the priority of what is necessary to remove one of the big obstacles to more housing and more affordable housing. So this creates us the opportunity and it creates the framework. It is really important that we can have that conversation. I'll repeat, we will not always agree, but having a forum around where we can agree and what we can prioritise and getting it within central government's radar is critically important. Now, we need to pass this today. Cabinet also needs to pass it. So there's no guarantee that Cabinet is going to want to do this, but at the moment we have the support of the key ministers that have been nominated, and I'm hopeful it'll happen. But it will give us that direct input to work collaboratively with government. Won't produce agreement on everything, including the rural-urban boundary, which, you know, will be an interesting issue for all of us, but it will give us a pathway forward and it will be valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. Councillor Holtz, please.
Thank you. I'm delighted to see us at this stage, and you know, it's no secret that probably over the last 2 terms there's been a measure of frustration all round with this, and exactly as the Mayor says, you know, last term we worked so hard to get the unitary plan to a point at which most of the council responsibilities were discharged. We created, you know, enough land and enough future land for the next couple of decades. We resolved issues of density, and we did our very best to come up with planning rules that worked. The big missing chunk now is to get government to actually understand what that's about and to genuinely get around the table and listen, and this provides that opportunity, and it's been a very, very long time coming. We have a whole lot of quick and easy solutions to housing affordability, you know, sort of floated around and waved around, and quick and easy solutions are often the most ineffective and unsustainable, and, you know, every politician thinks they've got the answer, and every politician, quite frankly, has failed. So this is a genuine and meaningful approach, and I am delighted to join my colleagues to do this, and thank you for your confidence in putting me there. because there's something quite useful in knowing the long, hard politics that's gone into reaching this space, and not the least of which flying the flag for the West a little bit and gently, because it is completely left out of the terms of reference, and the Northwest is one of our major growing areas and certainly will require some attention. So I have no intention of being parochial, but I also make no apologies for flying that flag. And I think, Mr. Chair, the point that you make in here about whether the rural-urban boundary will be raised, I'm certain it will. So, kia ora, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Councillor Sayers, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Something needs to change. So I'm very pleased that this working group's going down and having discussions with government. Certainly welcome the ideas around looking at alternative funding tools. As the Deputy Mayor talked about, the housing modules and other ways of building things. But I think I'd just like to send the message to the team going down there to carry with them that affordable housing, the first objective, increased and accelerated provision of quality affordable housing, in my opinion, is impossible to achieve with land prices being what they are. So unless people can start buying bare sections and new subdivisions at rates where they can actually build a house that is in a package affordable, we won't be able to reach that objective. In other words, it's impossible to build an affordable house in Auckland at the moment because you can't get the land in the right place. So I'd hope there's good focus on that. I suspect that the rural-urban boundary will be part of that discussion, as well as other levers that both central government and council can pull.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Good points. So members, some of us are, and Councillor Hulse is very familiar with the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Act, and a number of others are. And I think we, as a council, did our damnedest to honour our part on that. But it really did not go as far as we all expected, particularly on affordability. Council, without doubt, addressed its responsibility on supply through that, and the Unitary Plan has addressed that. And the Mayor has given some numbers here today. We are seeing success, but we're also a long way off. As of today, we have an estimated by our Chief Economist, a 46,000 dwelling deficit in Auckland, 46,000 houses short as of right now. So a long way to go. So this joint program, in some ways, it effectively formalises a lot of the informal discussions we've been having with government. There's no scarcity of ministers that have been toing and froing into Auckland Council, actually. Councillor Bartley and myself, we wrote a letter to a minister about universal design, the quality of intensification, effectively. And the letter back, which came within about 2 weeks, indicated 3 ministers wanted to see us to discuss universal design. Not 1, 3. And we've got that meeting arranged. But this formalises that sort of informality and a lot of the separate work streams that are already underway within council and at government. So it brings together that the government's urban growth agenda, and it brings together the Auckland Plan 2050, particularly the development strategy. It brings together the Mayoral Housing Task Force 33 recommendations. It binds all that together. And so our long-range plans are reflected, and the government's ambitious plans are also reflected in the work streams that are identified at this stage. I think where we might find a bit of discussion to be had is around the edges, and it's really just around the edges. And I'm not talking the edge, I'm talking around the edges, because I think we're very close, and we're starting to get a little bit fixated on this rural-urban boundary. One thing I would say, and I do fully expect, and successive governments have demanded this of council, that they need to see the business case. They needed to see the business case for the CRL. And they asked us that again and again. Well, when it comes to it, I'd actually like to see the business case for a relaxation on the rural-urban boundary. I'd like to see that quantified. I'd like to see the values of amenity gained, amenity lost. I'd like to see the values of the motoring mortgage that will be falling upon people if they are not connected communities that come about through a relaxation in that rural-urban boundary. And I think that's pretty fundamental. So going forward, I can assure you, members, when we are in discussions with the ministers, and if there is any talk about a relaxation in the rural-urban boundary, the first thing that I will be putting is show us the business case. Show us the business case. And Treasury will be reminding ministers as well of the model for what a real business case entails. So the program will also need to address...
Mr. Chairman, that could be added to the light rail business case.
Yeah.
You're welcome to have your speaking turn in a minute, Councillor Lee. The program will also need to address the impact on the existing centres that might be impacted by the growth centres. And I'm thinking particularly, but not exclusively, centres like Manurewa and Papakura and how they are impacted by a big focus on Drury. Drury, without doubt, has started and it's going to expand. But I think we can't take our sights off, Councillor John and Councillor Daniel Newman, we can't take our sights and will not take our sights off the impact of that development on centres that we know already need our support. So in the last motion that has been added there, all the members of this, of the council working here will absolutely ensure that the planning committee is not just updated, but abreast of all the critical decisions that have to be made along the way. And at least it will be quarterly basis reporting, if not more, when we identify issues that do need to come back to this committee. So I commend, as does the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor and others, the support to be given to this program. Councillor Lee, did you want to exercise your right to speak? No. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, yeah, I support this, but I wanted to make some comments about what I see as missing, and that is where we are building in existing communities, that we respect that, and that message is also, you know, a message that we respect, a message that government respects, because we can build and build and build, but if we could do it in a way that retains the current communities and adds to them rather than replace them, I think that would be the ideal, that would be the best. The sense I also get from this report is that developers are compliant, and I would like to see us hopefully beef up our enforcement, because as we see from the small site-specific investigations, they are not compliant. Even though we want housing, but we also want to protect our environment as well, which is why it's good to see the Chair of Environment and Community also part of this group. So yeah, those were just my brief comments on this. Yes, build, but be mindful of the communities that we're building in. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In giving my support to this, acknowledge the comments that were made that the basis for this is actually based on the Auckland Transport Alignment Project, and it's one of those, along with Councillor Lee, who worked very hard to be able to gift that to the incoming Mayor, and to credit Len Brown for giving us a huge amount of support with the Board of Auckland Transport. I think this is the right model. But I do say that we would never have got the Auckland Transport Alignment Project through unless we had had regular face-to-face meetings with the Prime Minister down and the ministers of the day. So what you're proposing is probably a bit overdue, if I can say so. I also think that you're going to need to have the wider support, so it's good that you're bringing it to the Planning Committee on a regular basis. So I'm in favour of it. all I would encourage you in saying that it's, you know, it's probably a bit overdue, it's good to get the parties together, is be strong in your negotiations. That is really what I want to hear. I think too often we have been passive in our negotiations with central government, and I think that this is an opportunity not for chumminess, not for anything other than utter professionalism in terms of determination of bringing forward the issues to the government of the day, and frankly, getting that support, particularly financial support, out of them. I'm pleased if it is modelled on the Auckland Transport Alignment Project. I hope that there are lessons that we can learn from that, but that sounds a good starting point. So I look forward to your progress reports on that and the strength of your negotiating power.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Shall we put that to the vote then? It is moved by the Mayor, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. A, B and C. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Can I record that as unanimous? We will? Thank you. Thank you, Penny.